Okay, we start going a little long in that last chapter, so I went ahead and created um, a second part. So this is like a continuation. In chapter 28, we started setting up the name boundaries in sheets. We got to the point where we had our boundaries set at the even increments, but we wanted now to start adding additional boundaries at irregular stations, such as like drainage structures and entrances, that sort of thing. So, okay, let's say we've got an existing pipe culvert out there. You probably want a cross-section at that location. If we had field entrances, you'd want them there. Other locations, anything in addition to that interval. And even after, you've completed, let's say you create your cross sections at these intervals, you got your boundaries, and then you got out of the file back in. You don't have to start over again. You can actually just start, adding boundaries. Now, if you processed your sheets, you would have to delete the sheet model, which we can easily replace if you process sheets. As you can see now, in fact, I deleted the sheets. They're the ones that, this said sheet in parentheses on them. You can just select those models and just delete them out. But there's no need to delete the drawing models. We can add to them. And let's start off by just looking at, before we add the additional name boundaries, I'm going to hit that right lower name boundary, which is called, manage name boundaries. And I can expand out on the cross sections, and so, this is giving me a listing of all the cross sections where those all the borders and all the information associated to it, which includes save views. It automatically did that for us. If I open up my save views, I see that as well. Okay, now one thing before we get started, notice that it went with the default name. I could rename this, I believe, probably in properties. Not going to. We'll just go with the default there. But let's go ahead and add some cross sections to the grouping it's called. Okay, the first thing that we always do, right? We make sure we have our 3D view open, because that is where the cross section boundary is located. If I hover over that, I can see it's not in a reference file. It's actually, the boundary is in the 3D model of this design file. So, okay, here's the steps. Go to name boundaries, and then here you're deciding, do I want the pipe culvert cross sections to be incorporated with all my cross sections, or do I want all of the pipe culvert cross sections together? Because it's going to make a difference here. If you want them all together, then go ahead and create a new group. But if you want them to be incorporated with these cross sections, make sure that you select that same grouping, and it will incorporate the cross section. Okay, one thing that I was having some issues with in that part 1 video is I was trying to change that interval to 0, which apparently it doesn't like that. But it doesn't really matter, because what I can do is just, when you snap to the element, that you kind of get the same result. So I guess that's what I normally do anyway. So let's go ahead and do that. So we are going to always, start off by data pointing on the alignment. And the first and only cross section, in this case, is going to be at the intersection of the pipe culvert with the alignment. So data point there. And then now, instead of moving my cursor and placing another cross section at that 100-foot interval, I'm going to go back and I'm going to snap to the exact same location. You saw it placed it in the 2D view, but when I data point again, and it placed it in the 3D view, which is what? Right there. It's that one. Yeah, there. When I highlight it, yeah, you see it highlighted in blue right there. Okay, so now all I did there was I created the boundary, but one thing that's easy to forget to do, this did not do, was notice that it did not create a drawing model for that particular boundary that I just placed. So what I need to do is go back to my named boundaries, and I see that there's that pipe culvert cross section located within that same grouping. And then if I select just that cross section, or if I did multiple, I added multiple cross sections for culverts, I could select all, individually select them all at the same time. Then I right click and I say create cross section drawing file, and we could, but we don't want to create a sheet model, because we want to create a sheet model when they're all incorporated together, right? So I'm going to turn off create sheet model. So I'm only creating the drawing model at this point. Click OK. And there it is at that odd station. And then if I would have done what we will be doing in later chapters, which is using the drainage and utilities, and we're going to be adding in we're going to be modeling our pipe culverts and entrances and all those kinds of things. And when we do that, then only at that point is that pipe culvert going to automatically show up in the cross section. Okay, but that's going to be in the Road 2 class, the next class. It's not part of this first, what's most likely going to be a 3-day class. Okay, so now I've got all of my drawing models created, and so now I'm ready to go ahead and create all my cross-section sheets. So again, I'm going to go back to that grouping, and I can either select on the entire grouping, or I think I can select all cross sections at the same time. I'll just select the group. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say create cross section sheets from drawings. I look at it all looks fine. These are all new sheets. All the defaults are good. Say OK. And you can see it's processing all my sheet models right now. And there you can see at various locations here. This is usually how I navigate. It's the quickest way to do that. Or go to view and you got the same thing up there. View groups. But really all it's doing is creating a model. There's your model. You're more familiar with this dialog. It's been around forever. So yeah, so you can see it create drawing models. Remember, that's my design model, drawing models, and my sheet models down below. And the green one says this is one that you're in. And you can also see it right there. So this worked, real similar to, very similar to plan and profile sheets. The only difference is, the boundary. It actually places, multiple references on this one sheet. Well, I guess plan and profile does the same thing. Places multiple references. But yeah, each one of those drawing models are then referenced to the sheet model. So really, there's really nothing in this file at this point in time. There's only one exception. I'll show you here in a second. If we were to look at our reference file, we can see that I didn't mean to do that. Each one of the cross sections are a separate reference. Somewhat like GeoPack used to be. They used to be, a separate reference file. Of course, we know The big difference here is that it's pointing to a drawing model, not a design file. And we know that in that drawing model, what we're looking at is a live view of the model. We've talked about that. If I was to open up that, I'll just go straight into that 3D model, right? So there's that. There's the model, the live. We're sitting in the 3D file. So whatever files are in here, which I can see, okay, I've got a right-of-way, I got a corridor, and I've got the alignment, and I've got the existing terrain. So anything that's referenced here is going to show up in those sheets. So that would be, for bigger jobs, you're going to have multiple corridors, or either that, or you're going to have a master corridor file that contains all the corridors. Either way works. And anything else that you've done in 3D. Much later, maybe like in a more advanced class, we can get into, you could actually do some drafting in 3D. I mean, you could virtually anything. Amazingly enough, I mean, you could even have a house that is in 3D, or a business, and it's off to the side, and your cross section would actually cut right through that house, and would actually, if you modeled the house, which you can, and you draw that up, it would actually show. So as you can see, we can make anything in a 3D model show up in the cross sections regardless of how it was created. If it was created through something like what we used here, that's called corridor modeling, which was in 2D and it gets automated in 3D, that would show up. If we drafted in 3D, I won't go on and on, but you get what I'm saying. So I don't know if that's totally clear, just naturally, without maybe someone mentioning that. We're not going to talk about annotation anymore in this chapter. We got a separate chapter for that. But of course, well, now here we go. The annotation is. The grid is actually part of the annotation. So notice that, we are going to talk about sheet cell right now. So notice the sheet cell really just looks like a plan sheet almost, because it does not contain the grid, because now, just like the profile view contained the profile grid, cross sections have a grid, right? All right, so let's check to see where the sheet border is coming from. It's coming from a reference file also. So let's look at that reference file. And I can hover over it, double click on it, and notice that it's actually pointing to what? It's pointing to that same sheet borders file that in the plan sheet file. That remember this? We copied this file from the IDOT standards and we placed it in the work set of student 1, or whatever your student number is, under standards and sheet borders. So the configuration variables, that's what does this. It has us automatically pointing to that location, right? And so it's the same thing here, so I don't know, we need to go over this again. But you've got a couple options again, and this is identical to the plan sheet, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I'll just quickly try to say here that if you wanted to change the state of Illinois, if this is a county job, which it is, oftentimes you don't leave the state of Illinois Department of Transportation. You want to change that? Well, you can do so by just going to that. I can select it in the reference file. I could say, hey, open this up in a new session. I could go in and I change it, and then it will automatically, because it's referenced, all the sheet models are referenced, it'll automatically show up in all the sheets. I can do that the same way for anything that remains the same. I could change it at the border level. That's one way of doing it that increases your efficiency. In fact, you could just leave it at that. I do want to mention though that the new process also uses something from your work set, And let's see, how far into this are we? 14 minutes. Okay, we can continue going in this video. Okay, so see all this text here? This text is actually linked to some information in your work set, and ultimately what it's going to do for you is it can automatically populate this information for you. And so that would be one way. Another way, there's a couple ways here of making, as you know, with developing plans in the past, it's kind of annoying and tedious and takes a long time to go into every single sheet and populate this information and type it in over and over and over again. So we just mentioned the one way would go in direct into the sheet border and change that information one time there. The other way is, I'm just going to close out of this file for a second, and I just wanted to show you, because I don't think we covered this in setting up the work set, so instead I'm going to cover it here, is that remember when we created your Student 1 work set? One thing that I didn't mention was properties off to the right hand side here. And if I go to the properties pull down and I select advanced properties, notice that as part of this work set I could key in this information, and then what that does for you is when you run these name boundaries, create sheets, plan sheets, and cross section, and any detail sheets, that it will take whatever information that you type in here, and then it will update that text. It's linked, it updates somehow. Honestly, I'm not even sure how it works, but it updates that text to reflect whatever you type in here. So I would say only use this on information that, and this is going to apply to all of your sheets. So you would probably only want to, if you're going to use this method, you're only going to key in the information that would not change on various sheets, like something like scale. It'd be highly unusual to have the same scale on every single one of your sheets. So you're probably not going to use that. County, contract number, that sort of thing. You could key it in here, or you could, like I said, you could have just changed your sheet border, because you're working with the sheet border that was in your work set, right? So it's kind of an either or situation. But I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of this, that this does work.